370.
Malaysian 370, Lampu radar, good morning. Climb flight level 250.
Morning, level 250, Malaysian 370.
At 1:19 a.m. on March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared from radar screens. The Boeing 777, carrying 227 passengers and 12 crew members, was flying from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. It should have been a routine red-eye flight, lasting just under 6 hours. Instead, it became aviation's greatest mystery. The disappearance of MH370 defied logic, challenged our understanding of modern aviation, and spawned countless theories. For over a decade, investigators, scientists, and amateur sleuths have searched for answers. Debris has washed ashore on distant beaches. Satellite data has been analyzed and reanalyzed. The ocean floor has been scanned with the most sophisticated technology available. Yet, the main wreckage remains hidden, and the truth of what happened that night continues to elude us. This is the story of Flight 370, every theory explained, and the enduring quest to solve aviation's most perplexing enigma. The evening of March 7, 2014, began like any other at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Passengers checked in for the overnight flight to Beijing, stowing luggage and settling into their seats. Among them were families returning home, business travelers, and a group of Chinese artists heading to an exhibition. The cockpit crew consisted of Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a veteran pilot with over 18,000 flight hours, and First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, who was transitioning to the Boeing 777. The aircraft itself, registered as 9MMRO, was nearly 12 years old, but had an excellent maintenance record. At 12:41 a.m. local time, Flight 370 was cleared for takeoff. The engines spooled up and the massive aircraft lifted into the night sky, climbing toward its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Everything proceeded normally as the plane headed northeast toward Vietnam. For the first 40 minutes, the flight was utterly routine. Captain Zahari communicated with air traffic control in Kuala Lumpur, providing standard position reports. The aircraft's transponder transmitted its location, altitude, and speed to ground stations. Passengers settled in for the night, some sleeping, others watching movies on seatback screens. At 1:01 a.m., the flight crossed into Vietnamese airspace. Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control instructed Captain Zahari to contact Ho Chi Minh City controllers. His response would be the last words anyone would hear from Flight 370. "Good night, Malaysian 370, came the calm acknowledgement. The voice was relaxed, professional, unremarkable. Investigators would later debate whether it was Zahari or Farik speaking those final words. 18 minutes later, at 1:19 a.m., something happened. The aircraft's transponders stopped transmitting. On radar screens, the blip representing MH370 simply vanished. Vietnamese air traffic controllers expected Flight 370 to make contact. When minutes passed without communication, they tried repeatedly to raise the aircraft on radio. Silence. They contacted Kuala Lumpur, assuming the plane might still be in Malaysian airspace. Confusion reigned as controllers on both sides tried to locate the missing aircraft. Protocol required immediate action, but precious time slipped away as authorities attempted to determine what had actually happened. Was it a communication failure? Had the plane turned back? Meanwhile, military radar installations had detected something unusual. A Malaysian military radar station on Penang Island had tracked an unidentified aircraft crossing back over the Malay Peninsula. moving in the opposite direction from Flight 370's planned route. At the time, operators didn't connect this mysterious blip to the missing passenger jet. That realization would come later, after the sun rose on a crisis that would captivate the world. When dawn broke on March 8th, Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 had failed to arrive in Beijing. Families gathered at the airport, their anxiety mounting with each passing hour. In Kuala Lumpur, Malaysian authorities initiated search and rescue operations, focusing initially on the South China Sea along the flight's planned route. Ships and aircraft from multiple nations converged on the area, scanning the water for any sign of wreckage. But they were looking in the wrong place. Analysis of military radar data revealed a shocking truth. Flight 370 had turned back. After the transponder went dark, the aircraft had made a sharp left turn, crossing back over Malaysia and heading northwest toward the Andaman Sea. This was no accident, no sudden catastrophic failure. Someone had deliberately diverted the aircraft from its course. The revelation transformed the search from a potential accident investigation into something far more sinister. The question that haunted investigators was simple yet profound. Why? Why would an aircraft deviate so drastically from its flight path? Why would the transponder be switched off? And where did the plane go after turning back? The answers lay in data that seemed impossibly arcane, a series of electronic handshakes between the aircraft and a communications satellite. Every hour, the Boeing 777 satellite communications system sent a brief ping to an Inmarsat satellite orbiting over the Indian Ocean, confirming its operational status. These pings contained no location data, but engineers realized they could analyze subtle variations in the signal's frequency to estimate the aircraft's distance from the satellite. This Doppler effect, the same phenomenon that changes the pitch of a passing siren, provided crucial clues. After weeks of complex analysis, investigators determined that Flight 370 had continued flying for approximately 6 hours after disappearing from radar, ultimately ending somewhere in the South Indian Ocean. The search area was staggering in its immensity. Based on satellite data and fuel calculations, authorities identified a vast arc stretching across the Indian Ocean, thousands of miles from where the aircraft was last seen on radar. This remote region, far from shipping lanes and inhabited land, became the focus of the most expensive search operation in aviation history. Ships equipped with side-scan sonar and autonomous underwater vehicles scoured the ocean floor, mapping terrain that had never before been seen by human eyes. The depth reached over 20,000 feet in places, and the conditions were treacherous. Underwater mountains, deep valleys, and strong currents complicated the search. Month after month, vessels crisscrossed the search zone, finding shipwrecks and geological features, but no trace of MH370. Families of the victims endured an agonizing wait, caught between hope and despair. In July 2015, more than 16 months after the disappearance, a man walking on a beach in Réunion, a French island in the western Indian Ocean, discovered a large piece of debris. It was a Flaperon, a wing component from an aircraft. Investigators quickly identified it as belonging to a Boeing 777, and serial numbers confirmed it came from Flight 370. Finally, physical evidence. The discovery validated the satellite analysis and confirmed that MH370 had indeed crashed in the Indian Ocean. Over the following months and years, additional debris washed ashore on beaches across the Indian Ocean basin, from Mozambique to South Africa to Madagascar. Each piece was analyzed for clues. Some showed marine organism growth patterns that helped estimate how long they had been in the water. Certain pieces exhibited damage consistent with a high-energy impact. Yet the debris raised as many questions as it answered. Why was it scattered across such a wide area? What could the damage patterns reveal about the final moments? With physical evidence confirming the crash location and satellite data plotting the general flight path, investigators faced a harder question: what caused this tragedy? Multiple theories emerged, each attempting to explain the bizarre sequence of events. The first and most straightforward theory involved mechanical failure. Perhaps a catastrophic electrical fire had disabled the transponder and communication systems, forcing the pilots to attempt an emergency diversion. Electrical fires had brought down aircraft before. In 1998, Swissair Flight 111 crashed after an electrical fire spread through the cockpit. Could something similar have occurred on MH370? The theory had appeal in its simplicity, but significant problems undermined it. A fire severe enough to disable communications would likely have incapacitated the crew quickly. Yet the aircraft flew for 6 hours after losing contact. The deliberate turns, the precise navigation back over Malaysia suggested conscious control, not an emergency situation spiraling out of control. The pilot's suicide theory generated intense controversy and resistance, particularly from the families of Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah and First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid. However, investigators couldn't ignore the evidence. Zahari was an experienced aviator who owned a sophisticated flight simulator in his home. Forensic examination of the simulator's hard drive revealed that someone had practiced a flight profile eerily similar to MH370's suspected route, flying south over the Indian Ocean until fuel exhaustion. Zahari had reportedly been dealing with personal issues, including marital problems and possible depression, though friends and colleagues described him as a dedicated professional who loved flying. The theory suggested that one of the pilots had locked the other out of the cockpit, depressurized the cabin to incapacitate passengers and crew, then flown the aircraft to a remote area to crash. It was a horrifying scenario, but not unprecedented. In 2015, Germanwings Flight 9525 was deliberately crashed into the French Alps by the co-pilot. Those who rejected the pilot suicide theory pointed to alternatives involving hijacking. Perhaps someone had breached the cockpit and taken control of the aircraft. But who and why? None of the passengers had backgrounds suggesting terrorist connections. Interpol confirmed that 2 passengers traveling on stolen passports were Iranian migrants seeking asylum, not terrorists. Still, could there have been a plot to steal the aircraft itself? The Boeing 777 was worth over $250 million, and its sophisticated systems contained valuable technology. Perhaps hijackers intended to land the plane at a remote airstrip, though no such location along the possible flight paths could accommodate a 777. Some theorists proposed that the hijackers' plans went wrong, resulting in the crash. Others suggested the aircraft was commandeered to access secure cargo, though the manifest revealed nothing particularly valuable or controversial in the hold. More exotic theories ventured into the realm of the highly speculative. Some suggested cyber attack or hacking of the aircraft systems. Modern aircraft rely on complex computer networks, and researchers had demonstrated theoretical vulnerabilities in Boeing systems. Could someone have remotely hijacked Flight 370? Aviation security experts largely dismissed this theory, noting that critical flight systems are isolated from passenger networks and would require physical access to compromise. Nevertheless, the theory persisted among those who believed in sophisticated plots involving state actors or intelligence agencies. Another theory proposed that MH370 was accidentally shot down by military forces during training exercises. The aircraft's flight path had taken it near military installations, and mistakes had happened before. In 1988, the USS Vincennes accidentally shot down Iran Air Flight 655, killing all 290 people aboard. Could a similar tragedy have occurred, followed by a cover-up? The controlled ditching theory offered a different perspective on the final moments. This hypothesis suggested that a skilled pilot had glided the aircraft to a controlled water landing, similar to Captain Sullenberger's famous Hudson River landing in 2009. If executed properly, a controlled ditching could keep the aircraft relatively intact, causing it to sink in one piece rather than breaking apart on impact. This would explain why the search had found so little debris and why the main wreckage remained undiscovered. The Flaperon and other pieces could have detached during the ditching, were separated as the aircraft settled on the ocean floor. However, critics noted that ditching a 777 on the open ocean at night would be extraordinarily difficult, and the damage patterns on recovered debris suggested a violent impact rather than a controlled landing. Still, the theory couldn't be entirely dismissed without locating the main wreckage. Ocean drift modeling added another layer to the investigation. Scientists used sophisticated computer models to simulate how debris would drift on ocean currents, working backward from where pieces were found to estimate the crash site. The models considered wind patterns, current speeds, and seasonal variations. Different research teams produced varying results, but most pointed to a crash location somewhere along the 7th arc, a curved line representing the aircraft's possible positions during its final satellite handshake. The underwater search concentrated on areas along this arc, but the zone remained vast. Without more precise data, searchers faced the daunting task of scanning thousands of square miles of ocean floor. The official search, led by Australia, Malaysia, and China, was suspended in January 2017 after covering 120,000 square kilometers without finding the aircraft. For the families and the world, it seemed the mystery might never be solved. Private search efforts continued where governments left off. In 2018, an American marine exploration company called Ocean Infinity launched a new search operation, using advanced autonomous underwater vehicles that could cover territory more quickly than previous efforts. The company worked on a no-find, no-fee basis, motivated by a potential reward and the challenge of solving the impossible mystery. Once again, ships deployed to the southern Indian Ocean, scanning the seabed with high-resolution sonar. And once again, they found nothing. After months of searching an additional 112,000 square kilometers, Ocean Infinity's contract expired without success. The company's CEO expressed frustration and puzzlement, stating that their technology should have found the wreckage if it was in the area searched. This raised a troubling possibility. Perhaps the satellite analysis was wrong, or perhaps critical assumptions about the aircraft's final hours were incorrect. New theories emerged as conventional searches failed. Some researchers suggested that MH370 had flown farther than previously calculated, landing outside the searched areas. Flight profile analysis indicated that if the aircraft had been in a descent rather than level flight during the final satellite pings, its trajectory would have been different. Others proposed that the plane had glided significantly after fuel exhaustion, extending its range beyond the calculated impact zone. A skilled pilot could potentially glide a 777 for over 100 miles without engine power, dramatically expanding the search area. In 2020, British aerospace engineer Richard Godfrey claimed to have developed a new tracking method using archived data from a global network of amateur radio operators. His analysis suggested a crash site farther south than previously searched, but independent verification of his methodology remained controversial among experts. The impact of MH370's disappearance extended far beyond the mystery itself. Aviation authorities worldwide implemented new tracking requirements to ensure that aircraft could never again vanish so completely. The International Civil Aviation Organization mandated that airlines track their aircraft at least every 15 minutes, with 1-minute intervals if a plane is in distress. Manufacturers developed new technologies, including deployable flight recorders that could eject from a crashing aircraft and float, transmitting their location. Satellite tracking systems became standard equipment, eliminating the gaps that had allowed MH370 to fly undetected for hours. The tragedy also sparked debates about cockpit security, mental health screening for pilots, and the accessibility of flight recorders. Each piece of wreckage, each new analysis, each theory added to our understanding while reminding us how much remained unknown. For the families of the 239 people aboard Flight 370, the years since the disappearance have been marked by grief, frustration, and an agonizing absence of closure. Without wreckage, without bodies, without definitive answers, their loss exists in a terrible limbo. They have formed support groups, lobbied governments, and fought to keep the search alive. Some have embraced theories that offer explanations, while others remain skeptical of all speculation. Memorial services have been held, yet the lack of physical remains makes traditional mourning rituals impossible. The Chinese government, whose citizens comprise the majority of passengers, has faced particular pressure from families demanding accountability and answers. Compensation claims have been settled, but money cannot replace the need for truth. Many families have said they don't care about blame or liability, they simply want to know what happened to their loved ones. Among the passengers were artists and professionals, children and grandparents, each with their own story, now frozen in time. There was Yuchin Lee, a young couple's 2-year-old son, traveling with both parents. There were the 23 employees of American technology company, Freescale Semiconductor, leading to conspiracy theories about patent fights and corporate espionage. There was Muktesh Mukherjee, a 64-year-old Canadian, traveling with his wife to begin retirement in Beijing. Each person represented a unique life, dreams, and connections. The crew, too, had families and futures that ended inexplicably that night. When we discuss theories and evidence, it's essential to remember that at the center of this mystery are real people whose absence has left permanent wounds in the lives of those who love them. Conspiracy theories have proliferated in the information vacuum left by MH370's disappearance. Social media and internet forums host elaborate scenarios involving government cover-ups, secret military operations, and implausible plot twists. Some theories claim the aircraft was hijacked to Diego Garcia, a U.S. military base in the Indian Ocean. Others suggest it was shot down to prevent sensitive information from reaching China. A few even propose that MH370 is hidden somewhere, intact, waiting to be used in a future terrorist attack. These theories often rely on cherry-picked data, misunderstood technical information, or deliberate misinformation. While skepticism toward official narratives can be healthy, many conspiracy theories surrounding MH370 disrespect the victims and distract from legitimate investigative efforts. They also demonstrate how modern communication can amplify speculation and make distinguishing fact from fiction increasingly difficult. What do we actually know with certainty about Flight 370? We know it took off normally and flew for approximately 40 minutes on its planned route. We know the transponders stopped transmitting at 1:19 a.m. We know military radar tracked an aircraft, almost certainly MH370, turning back across Malaysia. We know satellite communications continued for about 6 more hours, with the aircraft heading generally south over the Indian Ocean. We know the plane ran out of fuel somewhere along the 7th arc. We know it crashed into the ocean, and we know debris from the aircraft washed ashore on Indian Ocean beaches. These facts are not in dispute. What remains unknown is why the aircraft diverted, who controlled it during those final hours, what happened to the passengers and crew, and precisely where the main wreckage lies. These unknowns may seem like details, but they are the difference between a tragedy we can understand and an enduring mystery. The search for MH370 has advanced our understanding of ocean topography, drift patterns, and deep-sea search technology. The underwater mapping conducted during the search revealed new features of the Indian Ocean floor, contributing to scientific knowledge. The challenge of analyzing sparse satellite data pushed aerospace engineers to develop new tracking and analysis methods. The international cooperation, despite occasional friction, demonstrated what can be achieved when nations work together on a common goal. These advances, however cold comfort to the families, represent a legacy beyond the mystery. The technology and procedures developed in response to MH370's disappearance make aviation safer and make it less likely that an aircraft could vanish so completely again. Yet none of these achievements bring us closer to answering the fundamental question: what really happened? Some investigators maintain that the evidence points most strongly toward deliberate action by someone in the cockpit, likely pilot suicide. They argue that no other theory adequately explains the series of deliberate navigational changes, the timing of the transponder deactivation, and the flight's continuation for hours into remote ocean territory. Critics counter that this conclusion relies too heavily on circumstantial evidence and unfairly tarnishes the reputations of Captain Zahari and First Officer Farik without definitive proof. They note that no suicide note was found, no clear motive was established, and the simulator data could have innocent explanations. Malaysian authorities, in their final report released in 2018, stated that the cause of the disappearance could not be determined with certainty. They ruled out mechanical failure as unlikely, but stopped short of declaring any single theory as definitive. The inconclusiveness of the official investigation has left room for continued debate and speculation. Could the mystery ever be solved? The ocean is vast, but it's not infinite. The main wreckage of MH370 exists somewhere on the seafloor, preserved in the cold, dark depths. Eventually, with enough time, technology, and resources, it could be found. The black boxes, though their batteries died years ago, could still provide crucial data about the flight's final moments if recovered. Cockpit voice recordings and flight data would likely answer most remaining questions. Some researchers believe that advances in underwater search technology, including improved autonomous vehicles and artificial intelligence for analyzing sonar data, will eventually make finding the wreckage feasible. Others suggest that a lucky break, perhaps a commercial vessel's sonar accidentally detecting the debris field, might solve the mystery. The precedent exists. Air France Flight 447 took 2 years to locate after crashing in the Atlantic in 2009, but searchers eventually found it. There have been calls to resume the search, supported by some families and independent researchers. In 2022, Malaysia's government announced it would consider restarting search operations if new, credible evidence emerged regarding the wreckage location. Ocean Infinity has expressed willingness to conduct another search with updated technology and new search areas based on recent analysis. The financial cost would be substantial, tens of millions of dollars for a search that might yield nothing. Governments must weigh this expense against other priorities, a calculation that seems cold when measured against the need for answers. Yet as years pass, public attention fades, and the political will to fund another search diminishes. The families worry that their loved ones will be forgotten, that the mystery will remain unsolved, not because it's unsolvable, but because the world has moved on. The psychological impact of unexplained disappearances extends beyond the immediate families. Aviation professionals, frequent flyers, and anyone who has boarded a plane since March 8, 2014, has confronted the unsettling reality that MH370 represents. We live in an age of unprecedented technological connectivity. We can track packages, locate lost phones, and monitor our children's locations in real time. Yet a massive commercial aircraft carrying 239 people vanished, and after a decade, we still don't know exactly where it is or what happened. This contradiction challenges our assumption that modern technology makes us safe and that answers are always available. The mystery reminds us that despite our advances, we remain vulnerable to the unknown, and some questions resist even our most determined efforts to answer them.
From a purely technical perspective, MH370's disappearance exposed vulnerabilities in aviation tracking systems that have since been addressed. The gaps in radar coverage, particularly over oceans, allowed the aircraft to fly undetected for hours. The reliance on aircraft-based transponders, which could be switched off, created a single point of failure. The limitations of satellite tracking systems left investigators dependent on indirect analysis and probability models. These weaknesses have driven reforms, but they also highlight how commercial aviation balances safety with cost. Every additional safety system adds weight, complexity, and expense. Regulators and airlines must constantly evaluate these trade-offs, and sometimes, as MH370 demonstrated, gaps emerge that only become apparent when tragedy strikes. The question facing the industry is whether we've learned enough to prevent another MH370 or whether new vulnerabilities remain undiscovered.
The role of media and public speculation in shaping the MH370 narrative deserves examination. In the first weeks after the disappearance, news coverage was intense and often speculative. Every new piece of information or rumor generated headlines and analysis. This created an environment where theories could spread rapidly, sometimes outpacing official investigations. The 24-hour news cycle demanded constant content, even when little new information was available. Social media amplified speculation, with armchair investigators proposing theories and sharing supposed evidence. While crowdsourced investigation can sometimes help, it can also generate noise that obscures facts. The families found themselves caught in this maelstrom, their private grief becoming public spectacle. The media attention did keep pressure on authorities to continue searching, but it also created expectations that every theory would be investigated and every question answered immediately, expectations that the reality of complex investigations couldn't meet. If we step back from specific theories and examine the broader patterns, certain facts become particularly significant. The aircraft's diversion occurred precisely at the handoff point between Malaysian and Vietnamese air traffic control, a moment when responsibility was unclear and reaction time would be slowest. The transponder was deactivated, but the satellite communication system remained active. The flight path, as reconstructed from military radar and satellite data, suggests deliberate navigation rather than random flight. These details indicate planning and knowledge of aviation procedures. Whether that planning was executed by a pilot, a hijacker, or someone else remains the central question. The absence of any claim of responsibility, any ransom demand, or any clear motive makes the deliberate action theory simultaneously compelling and frustrating. If someone intentionally diverted MH370, why? What purpose was served by flying the aircraft into the remote southern Indian Ocean?
Alternative explanations must account for the same evidence. If mechanical failure caused the diversion, why did the aircraft fly for 6 hours? If hijacking occurred, who were the hijackers and what was their goal? If military action was involved, why has no evidence emerged in 10 years despite intense scrutiny? Each theory has adherents who believe their explanation best fits the facts, yet each also has significant weaknesses. This is perhaps the most frustrating aspect of the MH370 mystery. We have enough information to rule out simple explanations, but not enough to definitively establish what actually happened. We're left with a range of possibilities, from probable to possible to implausible, without the ability to move decisively from speculation to certainty. This ambiguity is difficult for human psychology to accept. We crave closure, explanations and narratives with clear endings. MH370 denies us that satisfaction. As years become decades, the likelihood of solving the mystery diminishes but never disappears. Wreckage can remain intact on the ocean floor for centuries. The Titanic was found 73 years after it sank. Ancient shipwrecks are discovered regularly, some thousands of years old. MH370's wreckage will not deteriorate or disappear. It will wait in the darkness until technology and determination converge to locate it. The question is whether that convergence will happen in our lifetimes. Some researchers remain optimistic, pointing to exponential improvements in search technology. Others are less hopeful, noting the vastness of the potential search area and the limited resources allocated to the effort. The families oscillate between hope and resignation, knowing the closure may never come, but unable to stop seeking it. Each anniversary brings renewed media attention, statements from officials, and promises to keep trying. But actions speak louder than words, and no major search operations have been conducted since 2018. The geopolitical dimensions of the MH370 search have added complexity to an already difficult situation. The aircraft was Malaysian, but the majority of passengers were Chinese, creating diplomatic sensitivities. The search area spanned international waters, requiring cooperation from Australia, Malaysia, China, and other nations. Different countries had varying levels of interest in solving the mystery, different resources to contribute, and different perspectives on the investigation. Tensions occasionally surfaced, particularly between Malaysia and China, with Chinese families accusing Malaysian authorities of incompetence or worse. Australia, which led much of the underwater search, faced domestic criticism about the cost and effectiveness of the operation. These geopolitical realities influenced how the search was conducted, how information was shared, and ultimately when the official search was suspended. Any future search would need to navigate these same complicated international relationships. Technological speculation about future search methods offers a glimmer of hope. Autonomous underwater vehicles continue to improve in range, endurance, and sensor capability. Machine learning algorithms can now analyze sonar data more effectively, identifying potential wreckage from ambiguous signals. Satellite technology has advanced, potentially allowing reanalysis of data from 2014 with new techniques. Some researchers have proposed using ocean gliders, low-cost autonomous vehicles that could maintain a persistent presence in promising search areas. Others suggest that advances in gravitational sensing or magnetic anomaly detection might locate the wreckage without direct sonar contact. These technologies exist or are in development, but deploying them requires funding and political will. The technical capability to find MH370 may already exist. What's lacking is the commitment to use it. This gap between capability and action is perhaps the most poignant aspect of the current situation. The question of closure takes different forms for different groups. For the families, closure might mean recovering remains, understanding final moments, or simply knowing where their loved ones rest. For investigators, it means determining cause and possibly assigning responsibility. For the aviation industry, it means confidence that lessons have been learned and implemented. For the public, it means satisfying curiosity and resolving cognitive dissonance about how something like this could happen. These different needs for closure don't always align, and satisfying one group might not satisfy another. If wreckage is found but provides no clear cause, is that closure? If a theory is proven but no remains are recovered, does that help families?
The complexity of closure in cases like MH370 reminds us that neat endings often exist only in fiction. Real tragedies resist simple resolution. In considering all the theories, all the evidence, and all the investigations, we're left with an uncomfortable truth. We may never know with absolute certainty what happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. We can assess probabilities, weigh evidence, and form conclusions, but definitive proof requires the main wreckage and the black boxes it contains. Until those are found, the mystery remains open. This openness keeps hope alive for some and prolongs agony for others. It allows theories to proliferate and speculation to continue. It means that every new piece of debris, every new analysis, every claim of a breakthrough generates attention and renewed interest. The mystery has taken on a life of its own, becoming part of aviation folklore alongside Amelia Earhart's disappearance and the Bermuda Triangle. Yet unlike those older mysteries, MH370 occurred in the modern era with advanced technology and global attention, making its resistance to solution all the more remarkable and troubling.
If the wreckage is ever found, what might we learn? The flight data recorder would show exactly what the aircraft did, every altitude change, speed adjustment, and system status. The cockpit voice recorder would capture sounds and potentially conversations from the final 2 hours of flight. The physical condition of the wreckage would indicate impact angle and speed. Examination of recovered remains might provide information about hypoxia, impact trauma, or time of death. The position of cockpit controls, if preserved, could indicate pilot input. Examination of electrical and mechanical systems might reveal pre-existing failures. In short, finding the wreckage would likely answer most remaining questions about the physical sequence of events. However, it might not answer the why. If pilot suicide occurred, we might never understand the motivation. If hijacking occurred but hijackers died in the crash, their identity and purpose might remain mysterious. Even with the wreckage, some questions might persist, but we would move from profound mystery to mere ambiguity.
The MH370 disappearance has inspired books, documentaries, podcasts, and countless articles, each attempting to piece together the puzzle. Investigative journalists have uncovered details overlooked in official reports. Independent researchers have developed alternative theories and methodologies. Some of this work has been valuable, contributing new perspectives or highlighting inconsistencies. Other efforts have been less helpful, adding noise to an already complex situation. The democratization of information through the internet means that anyone can become an investigator, analyst, or theorist. This has benefits and drawbacks. It keeps attention on unsolved mysteries and can pressure authorities to remain engaged. But it can also spread misinformation, disrespect victims, and create echo chambers where unsupported theories gain unwarranted credibility. Navigating this landscape requires critical thinking, respect for evidence, and awareness of our own biases and limitations. On March 8, 2024, the 10th anniversary of the disappearance, memorials were held around the world. Families gathered to remember their loved ones, to support one another, and to renew calls for the search to continue. Malaysian officials released statements reiterating their commitment to solving the mystery if new evidence emerges. Chinese families held vigils, displaying photographs and lighting candles. In Australia, where much of the search was coordinated, officials reflected on the unprecedented effort and expressed continued willingness to help. The anniversary brought a surge of media coverage, rehashing theories and interviewing experts. For a few days, MH370 returned to global consciousness. Then, inevitably, attention faded again. The families know this pattern well. The peaks and valleys of public interest, the way their tragedy becomes a story to be told and then forgotten until the next anniversary. They live with the mystery every day, not as a puzzle to solve, but as an absence that defines their lives. What would the passengers and crew want us to know if they could speak to us? Certainly, they would want their families to find peace. They would want the mystery solved, not for the sake of solving it, but so their loved ones could have answers and closure. They might want us to remember them as more than statistics or victims, to recall that they were people with full, complex lives that extended far beyond their tragic end. They would probably want changes made to prevent future tragedies, to ensure that their deaths contributed something meaningful to aviation safety. And perhaps they would want us to maintain some humility in our speculation, to recognize the limits of our knowledge and to treat their final hours with respect, rather than treating them as material for entertainment or conspiracy theories. These are not their words, of course. We cannot know what they would say. But in thinking about MH370, we should remember that at its center are human beings who deserve dignity in death as in life. The search for MH370 represents one of the most extensive and expensive operations of its kind. Ships traveled thousands of miles, staying at sea for months at a time. Sophisticated equipment was deployed in some of the most challenging conditions imaginable. Experts from multiple disciplines contributed their knowledge. Governments spent hundreds of millions of dollars. Private companies invested resources on spec. All of this effort, all of this expense, all of this determination, and yet the wreckage remains unfound. This doesn't represent failure exactly. The Indian Ocean is almost incomprehensibly vast, and the search area, while narrowed significantly, remains enormous. But it does represent the limits of current technology and resources. It reminds us that despite our capabilities, nature and probability can still defeat our best efforts. The ocean keeps its secrets, and some mysteries resist solution not because we lack the will to solve them, but because the challenge exceeds our grasp, at least for now. Looking forward, the question is whether we will ever resume the search with the scale and resources necessary to cover the remaining possible crash sites. Some researchers argue that the most likely areas have already been searched, and any future effort should focus on less probable zones based on alternative theories about the flight's final trajectory. Others believe that searchers simply missed the wreckage in areas already covered, perhaps because it's partially buried or hidden by terrain. Still others think that new analysis methods applied to existing data might pinpoint a more precise search area, making a targeted operation viable. Each perspective has merit, but without consensus and without a government or organization willing to fund another massive search, these debates remain academic. The wreckage waits, somewhere in the darkness, for someone to make the commitment necessary to find it. In the end, the mystery of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 confronts us with unsettling realities about the modern world. We are not as omniscient as our technology suggests. Safety is never absolute. Some questions resist even our most determined efforts to answer them. The disappearance of 239 people can occur without witnesses, without explanation, without resolution. These truths are uncomfortable, perhaps frightening, but they are truths nonetheless. MH370 is not the first aircraft to disappear over the ocean, and despite improvements in tracking and safety, it might not be the last. What sets it apart is the combination of modern technology and complete mystery, the paradox of knowing so much and yet not enough. As long as the wreckage remains lost, as long as fundamental questions remain unanswered, MH370 will continue to haunt us, a reminder that even in the 21st century, mysteries endure. 10 years have passed since that March night when Flight 370 vanished from radar screens. A decade of searching,
theorizing, mourning, and wondering. The families of the 239 people aboard have aged. Their children have grown. Their lives have continued in the shadow of absence. The aviation industry has changed, implementing new safety measures and tracking systems. Investigators have moved on to other cases, though some remain haunted by the unsolved mystery. The ocean has kept its secret, the wreckage lying somewhere in the darkness, waiting. We know more about MH370 than we did in those first confused hours, but we still don't know enough. The essential questions remain unanswered, and with each passing year, the likelihood of finding answers diminishes. Yet hope persists, stubborn and resilient, that someday, somehow, the truth will emerge from the depths.
This is the story of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, a tragedy that became a mystery and a mystery that endures. It is a story of 239 lives cut short, of families forever changed, of investigators pushed to the limits of their expertise. It is a story of the ocean's vastness and our own limitations. Every theory we've explored, from mechanical failure to pilot suicide, from hijacking to military shootdown, attempts to impose order on chaos, to make sense of the senseless. Some theories are more credible than others, supported by evidence and expert analysis. Others remain speculative, built on assumptions and circumstantial connections. But in the absence of definitive proof, all remain possibilities, however remote. The truth lies somewhere in the data we have, in the satellite pings and radar tracks, in the debris and drift patterns. Or perhaps it lies beyond our current understanding, waiting for a breakthrough we haven't yet achieved. Until that day, MH370 remains aviation's greatest mystery.